Also,
I'd like to call to order the Planning Commission meeting of April 14th, 2016. Let the record show that all of the commissioners are present and staff. At this point, I'd like for you to join with me in a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Are there any agenda changes today?
No, there are not.
Okay, next is our public comment period. If there's someone with us this morning that would like to address the Planning Commission on a land use item that's not on our agenda, this would be your opportunity. Nope, she says no. And that's 100% of our audience. So we're moving on to the consent agenda, which is the approval of the minutes from the March 24th, 2016 Planning Commission meeting. Are there any revisions, corrections?
no.
All right, is there a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
It's been moved in second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next is our public hearing, which is continued Planning Commission review and recommendation to the board on the general plan update. We are continuing our discussion of the public facilities and services element. So Peter?
Yes, thank you. So we got through the discussion section and the first set of first goal and policies, the general policies on page 14 and 15. Hopefully I captured all of the changes. There was a brief memorandum that went along with this version that sort of explained where things were changed. I did have a discussion. We met on Monday, Captain Macedo and I, to go over concerns that the Sheriff's Office had regarding the language regarding the Sheriff's law enforcement. Unfortunately, we both been really busy and he was unable to get edits back to me, but we were trading emails this morning, and I have one additional change I would like to make on page 9 based on conversations that we had. On the second paragraph, short two-sentence paragraph.
Please. Again?
Page 9.
Starts with the sheriff's response?
Yes. Second
Yes.
paragraph. Recommend that we strike the second sentence and add the following. Because population levels already exceed the desired population to staffing ratio, response time far exceeds that goal.
The last half of that sentence?
Strike it in 2011. the
Yeah, I
department
got that
received-
struck. But
Right.
because population levels have exceeded,
Because population levels already exceed the desired population to staffing ratio, response time far exceeds that goal. I don't have an exact number. In 2011, it was 41 minutes. Jim was unable to
fine, I get it.
Yeah, so just, and his concern was that we are already, some of the statements was that if we exceed that, well, we're already exceeding that. We already are below the desired staffing levels.
Right.
So you want to make that. And then when we get into the implementation measures, I have some additional edits that I'm going to recommend based on our conversation.
Okay, so where would the next plug-in come? Under law enforcement measures?
Yes, when we get on
When we
page
get there.
24, when we get to that discussion, I'll have some additional edits I'd like to recommend.
Okay, so we're going to have a placeholder for him for this?
Well, that
No,
would...
this is, I'm trying to insert what our conversation was and the concerns he raised to me. I had hoped that he would actually have some draft language for me to share with you. He was unable to do that.
That's what I mean. There's going to be there's going to be a new PF for something that we plug into.
No, I'm going to edit 4C and 4D. If you like, I can just say that right now.
No, we can wait.
I thought we'd wait
Okay.
till we get to that.
Right.
So that was the only other change I had in the discussion section. And if there's any other further edits that you think are necessary in that, we probably go over that now before we get into the rest of the goals and policies.
I just found a typo, just On the first page, implementation programs should be plural.
Actually,
No?
no. It's we have individual implementation measures, but the program is the whole, the compilation of all the measures.
Okay.
Could you give me the language again that Captain Masuda wants to put in on page 9?
Because population levels already exceed the desired population to staffing ratio, comma, response time far exceeds that goal.
Let me just think about that for a second.
And this is not Captain Macedo's language, this is my language, just so it's clear. But this is based on our conversation.
Wouldn't it read better to say, because the population to staffing ratio already exceeds the desired level, the response times far exceed that goal? Because the way, the language that you gave us has population levels exceeding something that's different. That is a ratio.
Because, yeah, I'm fine with that. Because population already exceeds.
No, because the population to staffing ratio already exceeds the desired level. Because that's what the problem is the ratio, not just the population.
Yes. One more time, read it so I make sure I have it right. Please.
I'll try, I didn't write it down. But I thought it was, because the population to staffing ratio already exceeds the desired level, response times far exceed that goal.
That's fine. Yeah, that works.
I have a
Probably
few
more
others,
accurate.
a few other minor changes on the introduction section.
Okay.
Okay, page 1, the bottom section, implementation program should be plurals, programs.
No, I just did that one. I beat you
you did
to it,
that
and he corrected me. I want it on the record that I beat Kelly to that one.
But actually, it's a program. There's individual measures, but it all entails into a single program. That's why it's not plural.
Okay, on page 2, the third paragraph down starts both CCWDs, UWMP, and the general plan, etc. The UWMP is no longer a defined term because it got stricken out of the preceding paragraph.
You're right.
And so it just needs to say both CCWD's 2010 Urban Water Management Plan, paren, UWMP, and paren, et cetera.
Okay.
And on that same page down on footnote 2, there seems to be a kind of a hanging part of that didn't get deleted on my copy, and looks like it probably should have been. It says CA Department of Finance Demographic Research Unit, et cetera. I may be wrong about that, but
I'm trying to remember because I think I specifically did not delete that, but the reference in the text was deleted.
so do you need to move the footnote then up to the end of the first sentence on the third paragraph?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, when that second sentence is struck, the footnote will still be there and it'll be connected to the first paragraph. So that was intended to be kept, yes.
Okay. Page PF.
Are you saying you're going to unstrike?
No, The first part of that footnote 2 is stricken. The part that was in parentheses, that part of the footnote will remain, and that's linked to the footnote, which would be that one sentence.
You just need to move the footnote reference up.
Yeah.
On page 3, the very first sentence, it reads, "There are 4 water districts that serve the county." Just as a matter of grammar, can we just say 4 water districts serve the county?
Sure.
And then skipping up to page 7, and this is just a glitch that we identified last time. It got fixed most places, but it didn't get fixed everywhere. And that is the first full paragraph that begins the general plan, background report, etc. We were going to change the phrase general plan to the word technical,
Yes.
and that happens throughout that page, actually, in the second part of the page, and all of those.
Huh. You're right. I went through and I did a search, and somehow it skipped all those. So,
Same thing happens at the top of page 8, first paragraph.
I'll go back and search
On
it again.
page 9, the third paragraph. At the very end of the underlined sentence that begins acute care services, there seems to be a gremlin right at the end. Is it an L or something? Footnote 9 on page 9 has the same general plan reference. It should be technical.
You got a lazy search and replace, don't
I
you?
guess so.
And then finally, skipping up to page 14, PF 1.7, which begins coordinate with LAFSCO, et cetera. That first sentence goes on to include the phrase prior to project approval and/or annexations. To be consistent, approval should be plural. And that's all I had.
Well, and I've got one on 1.9, coordinate with, that second part, line of that sentence, I think it should be timely provision instead of provisions.
Yeah.
Where's that one from, page 9?
1.9, page 14.
Near the end of the second line.
Yes, just strike the S. Anything else?
No,
So
none on
we're-
that.
Wait a second, I have a note on 1.1. Oh, on 1.1, page 14. We had a discussion about this, and my notes don't indicate the result of it, but I'm using my aging memory. Ensure that discretionary actions involving new development will not result in a reduction in the pre-project levels of service. The discussion, and it came from me, was I thought we had agreed to substitute reduction in pre-project levels with a threshold, with a reference to thresholds, which is the language that is used in, I think, PF 1A. That would not result in a reduction below thresholds, below acceptable thresholds, or words to that effect.
I had thresholds written in my notes, crossed it out, and we had put a period behind service and got rid of provided.
Yours would read then how?
Just the way it's written currently.
Okay.
I mean, I know there was a discussion about thresholds. I have thresholds written.
I was hoping that Peter's
and I
notes would
struck
be
it
more
out.
complete on
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. My notes have the same as what Fawn had.
Okay.
We talked about it, we did make some changes.
Let me
in
go to
the,
1A and see what I was, and
Yeah,
see if I can be
yeah.
reminded.
Because we switched standards to thresholds in the in the mitigation measure or implementation measure.
Yeah, you see 1A.
And then, yeah,
Okay, so to match it up, which makes sense to me that it wouldn't be, and I'm repeating my earlier argument, was that if you make a change, it could result in a reduction, it would almost certainly result in some reduction, some measurable reduction, but the point is, as long as it's not below a threshold, we're fine. As seems to be the point of 1A,
right.
the measure.
So
So,
we're establishing what those thresholds are through the implementation program.
so possibly the language would read, will not result in a reduction below acceptable thresholds of service. Maybe somebody can do better with that, but that's the concept. And maybe we can, looking at 1A, I think the language that I give you reflects that.
I'll defer to the rest of the commission.
Keep reading it. When you read on 1A after the underline, we used almost the same language there, David. In the top part, I see the thresholds that you're talking about. But I'm trying to remember the discussion, and it appears that we facilitate adoption of you.
So this was one, we didn't really come up with specific language in 1A. This was, you directed me to come back. It was, we read it multiple times, and the more I read it, the more confused I was myself about what it meant. So I broke it into two different measures and tried to clarify whether or not we captured the intent here. It was basically to establish some thresholds, as David suggests, and that those are where we're sort of draw the line. If our services and facilities are reduced below that threshold, then the developer needs to do something to make sure
Right.
it stays above that
That's the
level.
mitigation.
So, not result in a reduction below established thresholds for,
Yes.
Well, let me just comment on this. If 1A, if I'm understanding it, refers to minimum levels of service thresholds and so forth for services necessary to provide service to development, which I take it to mean new development, which is what's talked about in the first phrase of that provision. When you're back on PF 1.1 on page 14, you're talking about levels of service that already exist, not on a new development, but on what's already there on the ground.
right.
So aren't these addressing two different things?
I think maybe,
I think Mr. Worcester's point is that if we are already maybe not meeting the desired level of service, we certainly don't want to go below that, but is it the developer's responsibility to bring that level of service up to a level above what is, already in existence?
Well, that's one of my points, but I think 1A really is speaking to minimum levels of service thresholds that is necessary to serve a new development.
Right.
Okay, when you go to 1.1, that's not dealing with new development.
It says new
It's
development.
discretionary actions
It says new development,
involving new development.
specifically.
Well, then, in that case, there are no pre-project levels of service.
Well, the pre-project level of service is what the current residents are
In that neighborhood.
experiencing today.
There is, the example that I'm giving myself
That's what I
is,
thought.
you've got a project and it's going to impact an arterial traffic. Okay. Right now, this says that ensure the discretionary, this new development will not result in a reduction in the level of service on that road. Well, it almost certainly will every time.
Well,
Okay.
it could, and
But-
if it does, then there are requirements that that developer widen the road, put in improvements to bring it back up to that level of service.
Correct. But if that particular arterial has a threshold above which this development will not reduce, then the developer is okay. If it's determined that it will exceed that threshold, then he's got some work to do.
Right.
So the point is, it's not just if it will impact it in some way, because it's always going to impact it. But doesn't necessarily mean that he has to do something about it. If it's going to impact it in a way that's very slight and doesn't reduce it below its threshold, he's fine. Otherwise, why would we be talking about thresholds in 1A? 1A makes the point. 1.1 misses it.
But when you go to 1A, to use your example, my question is whether the minimum levels of service thresholds would encompass that arterial. That would-
And maybe we're getting a little sidetracked with talking about roads, because roads are addressed in the policies and the transportation circulation element. This would be other public facilities and services, fire protection,
Water, wastewater.
water, wastewater, I think,
Right.
solid waste disposal, those kinds of things. So,
Another way to look at it.
although roads are sort of the easiest one to visualize.
That's why I'm the easy, I want to go the easy route. This road in question, for some other reason, has already been upgraded in the past. Possibly for another development, or for some other reason. The county has upgraded this road. Now, the addition of this little development is certainly going to impact the traffic on that road. How can it not? But because it had previously been upgraded, its threshold is now high, and it can accommodate this new development with no further improvement.
Right.
Okay, that's a threshold. This is,
And we have those standards for roads. We're saying, okay, we're going to allow LOSC on the rural roads and LOSD within the community areas. And so if you're at A and you add, 20 peak hour trips, but it doesn't drop it down to C, you're still good.
that's right.
Yeah. And that's what we say in the circulation element. Very
That's
specifically.
correct. Now, that doesn't mean, their money is still going into the road bank, if you
Oh, yeah.
will.
Yeah.
Because another couple of developments, now you've reached your threshold, now everybody's money goes in and fixes the road.
Right.
Not just the last guy in the door.
And so, but because we have those very specific programs in place in the circulation element, as well as our current general plan, that's really not the issue. We don't have those levels of service standards for water or for sewer or for solid waste. And so what this policy and that measure is trying to say is we need to establish similar types of standards, thresholds for wastewater. How do we know that Valley Springs PUD will be able to provide sewer service to this new development without adversely impacting the existing residents in that area? Will they still be able to, and maybe sewer service isn't the best one, maybe water service is better. So if CCWD says we can still provide water, you get, and our standard is that you have X PSI in your pipes, or whatever the standard is, you get this much water and it won't impact our ability to serve you, in drought situations and in August, then that project can go forward. If not, then the developer's going to figure out, okay, how are we going to improve the system? Maybe we need to put a loop system in so that they have this, we're now impacting this neighborhood, so we're going to have to extend the water line, and not just extend it to our project, but loop it back so that we have a loop system, so adequate fire flow and pressure to serve the existing residents. They're okay right now, but if we add another 100 homes, their service could be diminished. That's what this policy and the measure is trying to get at. We don't have those standards now, and the idea is to, through establishing the thresholds in PF1, 1A, that it will be, we can know, so the developer knows, oh, this is what I have to do. And they can go to CCWD or UPUD and say, what happens if I add these lines here? And they'll do their calculations and their engineering and say, yeah, we can serve you. It doesn't diminish the service here, or it'll have a slight impact, but it still maintains our level of service.
Well, okay, let me see if I understand your point. 1A says we need to establish thresholds, roads, sewers, water, fire, whatever. Okay, fine. 1.1 says if we simply add will not result in a reduction below acceptable thresholds and pre-project levels of service. Then 1.1, then 1A says when you need to establish those thresholds, then you've got a maybe.
Okay.
1.1 says we're going to have, we don't want to reduce below thresholds. 1A says we need to establish thresholds for a variety of public services. Then there's a correspondence. I guess that's my only point, and I don't know how better to make it.
No, I understand that.
Another half a cup of coffee, maybe I'll get better.
Does it impact 1.1? I don't think it changes the intent much. It says that you are going to establish the thresholds, and then 1A says, or that development would exceed those established thresholds, and then the implementation is establishing the thresholds. I mean,
Yeah. But
I'm all right with that.
if a person pointed to 1.1 and didn't look at anything else, you'd see a problem. There's no problem in as much as this picks it up, but you've got to put the two together.
I'm gonna go with one, I'm fine with adding it. Peter, you don't see any,
I don't see, so,
let's just add the word thresholds, then David will have more coffee,
A result in reduction.
and you'll feel better.
result in a reduction below acceptable or established
Established, because you're going to establish them in 1A.
thresholds for levels of service. Not result in reduction.
Yeah, for levels of service, because that's all encompassing. Or pre-project, that's fine. That still works.
I think if you put in pre-project, it's a little confusing.
Yeah, I think
Fine.
the way it's going is to
Strike
strike
it.
in the pre-project. Strike that phrase and add below established thresholds for.
So you want to read it, just so we're...
Ensure that discretionary actions involving new development will not result in a reduction below established thresholds for levels of service.
Good. I think we're good.
Good.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
Any other comments on what Peter's revisions to our prior review? No, we're good. All right, so we're moving on to new territory. Goals and policies, water and wastewater. Starting with
Okay, give me a page, please.
2A, page 15.
Right.
Well, to start off, we just need a period after PF2B. Efficient use of water resources, period.
We can do that.
And I don't have anything else till we get down to what was 2.6.
I have yes, I'm at 2.6 as well.
Now, I take it that this stricken provision, would that have applied to non-discretionary actions?
No. I mean, obviously, if someone has existing lots and there's no, I mean, they want to build on it, that, you know, is well and septic is still acceptable, and we just, I think the reason this was stricken was that we're trying to say we want to direct our growth to the areas, we want to direct our growth to the areas where we have services, where we have public water, when, you know, where we're extending public water and sewer, you know, those are the areas that we're trying to identify where the growth is. But to say we're going to support development in areas that don't have public sewer and water, you know, that I think is contradictory to the direction that the board or the county, that the general plan is going, that says we want to try to focus our development, you know, in this community. It doesn't mean that it's not feasible or possible to do so. It just, it's not, I mean, it sort of gets back to some of the conversations we had on other things. Does the county want to support that? You know, going back to the conversation on easements. You can still do it, but we're just not going to make a statement that we're supporting that.
Well, suppose there were somebody wanted to put 2 houses. Would that then be a discretionary action that would implicate?
If there's subdividing the land, a parcel map that would create 2, but if it's consistent with the land use designation, that still would be, I mean, I think that what I was trying to get away from with, you know, by deleting this policy was that, you know, we'll still allow it. We're just not going to promote it. We're not going to support it necessarily.
Well, actually, I suppose you could also say that since this is the public facilities and services element, and by definition, this 2.6 is dealing with on-site water and wastewater service, which is not a public facility or service.
Right.
That it actually wouldn't fit very well here anyway.
Just, yeah, another point. Hadn't thought of that, but that's a good point.
Okay, I understand it.
We have other language, and I'm pretty sure it's in land use, to the effect that you were just mentioning.
Mm-hmm.
Correct, Peter?
I believe that's correct.
To the effect of where feasible, you extend, let's see, how does it go?
Let's see if I can find it.
Oh, I didn't mean to make you dig.
Well, I don't have them all memorized. Infrastructure such as water and sewer and high-capacity roads shall be encouraged within existing developed areas, areas contiguous to existing communities, areas where future development is anticipated by the general plans reflected in the general, well, it doesn't really get to it. I think it was in the descriptions of the land uses itself. For example, where we say in rural residential, parcels 1 acre and up to 4.9 require public water, but allow on-site wastewater treatment. So it's in the descriptions of the various land uses we say this is allowed. There may be some other policy, but I can't.
I'm confident it's in there because I think we made a pretty big deal out of it.
Yeah.
I don't remember us passing that over because that was a focal point.
Okay. Well, I'm okay with the deletion for the reasons
I am too under those. I understand that there's a difference between allowing it and pushing it.
So moving on?
I have issues on 2.8.
Me
Okay.
too.
Which seems to be a flat prohibition of
Yep.
new septic systems in areas where sewage treatment and disposal systems are available and have the capacity to serve new connections. So I guess my first question is if someone Why would someone prefer to have their own septic system if in fact sewage treatment and disposal systems were available and had the capacity? Why would somebody want to do that?
Because they don't want to pay that sewer and water
Right.
bill that is absolutely insane.
That's what I'm trying
I can
to
give you
get
a lot
at.
of reasons.
And if somebody does have that preference, why should the general plan flatly prohibit them from doing that?
I'll give you two scenarios. One is a person's got a very small plot, and there's not a good place to put a septic system and a house, and arrange it on the lot. It's not suitable. And you've got a sewer line there, it makes sense to hook up. But if a guy's got a pretty good parcel, and there's plenty of room for his land and everything else he wants, and a septic system, then that could be the preferable way to go with that particular parcel.
And I guess my other question is, why is this a public facilities and services issue? Because by definition, it's dealing with private septic systems.
Well, I guess it's the,
Because it's under water and wastewater and they're prohibiting septics, then we can.
so it's the intent to essentially require connection to the public facility where the public facility is available.
Well, the cost of hooking up to a wastewater system and water at the same time is sometimes prohibitive, and if they just want to repair or replace their septic upon a failure, prohibiting them from doing that. I know there's a contract.
Well, if someone's already on a septic
It
system.
says new.
Yeah,
New.
there would be no prohibition of someone repairing that, obviously. We wouldn't require them to connect to sewer.
But if they had a failure, that is new. They have to move it into a different location.
But it wouldn't be, again, the general plan policies apply when we review discretionary development. So if someone is doing a conditional use permit for a commercial business or a land division, then we would look at it and say, well, you're in the sewer district and you're able to be served, so we want you to
So
connect.
then the word prohibit should be new projects.
For discretionary projects.
I need clarification there because that word prohibit doesn't work.
For discretionary projects, comma, if you want to go, it would be limited to that, so that would be the preface.
Well, I'm not even sure I'm in favor of that. There's also an issue about what does being available mean? Because usually you have to pay for the pipe to get to the public sewer system.
Well, you might have to pay for your lateral, but if there's a main in the road, it means putting in a lateral
Yeah,
and hooking up. And that the treatment plant isn't over capacity.
I can give you an example of what he's talking about. In Avery, the main does run down the highway, but in order for the people on the back side off the highway, they're looking at a couple $1 million to run that lateral and hook up. It's pretty extreme.
Well, everybody has their own lateral. You don't share laterals. Everybody's got their own
In
lateral.
order to get lots that are back, there is a main there, but it's going to be extreme cost to get to that main and hook up. The way that this is worded, because there's a main within a certain distance, who's going to say, does the main have to run in front of their house to hook up already, or are they going to be running more main lines to get hooked up?
I think I would interpret it, maybe it's that you've got,
So-
there is a main line in the street and you have to create your own lateral and hook up.
The Safari Mobile Home Park had a failure, and the sewer line was running down, and there was no way they could afford to hook up, but yet they had a huge issue resolving that quite a few years ago.
I can't give you an example, but
And this does apply to new development, so the guys that are really way off the road, unless they're
let me address that.
already existing.
Here's what, and maybe this is what Kelly's talking about too. A discretionary development wants to go in. And there's no main there. CCWD says, we will extend our main to pick up that project. It's going to cost everybody a bundle of money. But this says, as long as CCWD is willing to run the line, these people have to hook up to it.
Right.
Right.
Okay, but that gives CCWD the discretion to know that that line's going to be paid for because these people are going to be required to hook up to it, no matter what the cost is.
Right. You know, I guess that's the policy question. Do we want to require development to connect to public sewer when it's available? Or should we continue to say, you know, it doesn't really matter if you're in the district or not, you can connect up, you can put in your own septic system if it works. If you're fine with that, we will strike this policy.
And this is a direction of the board, was supervisors, right? That they wanted to, wasn't this part of their whole policy about directing growth to areas that can provide, you can get public sewer and water. There's an environmental health issue.
I understand the overall issues, but with this clause and this policy, you're giving CCWD the power to run a line as they please to pick up guaranteed customers, and they don't have to be accountable for the cost. You're giving them the customers. They don't have to compete for them, so to speak. If the policy was where it's feasible, where it's economically feasible, etc., then CCD has to come up with a number that makes sense to pick up those customers. Right now, they don't.
Well, when the grant monies came forward to put the sewer system through Highway 4 up in the upper country, Arnold area, that grant specifically stated what lots had to mandate to hook up to it. That's part of the grant. So when you're running up and down the Highway 4 corridor, there were specific parcels that have to go into it based on the grant that CCWD received, but they weren't allowed to bring other people in until that capacity was met. I mean, there's some, I don't like it. I think that it's going to cause a conflict with what CCWD's arrangements were when they received the grant monies to put that sewer system in. You're going to be saying that you have to go on their septic system, but yet they have a grant that specifies what properties have to go in, even if there's availability there.
I guess I'm not familiar with the specifics of that.
Well, that's
Particular
CCWD
line, yeah.
would have to be in on that, and they'd have to pull that document forward. I mean, that's not. I just think that this is going to cause a major conflict.
The only other point I would have is we have a proposed measure to adopt standards for determining when public wastewater service shall be deemed available. That's PF-2C, which suggests to me that we don't have them now.
Just a second, let me read that.
It's on page 20.
Did you say 2C?
Yes, PF-2C on page 20.
Right. Excellent find. Because with 2C in mind, 2.6 doesn't take into account 2C.
You mean 2.8?
2.8.
I'm sorry.
It just seems to me that this is an area where perhaps
2.8.
the economics and the market ought to be driving the decisions rather than a dictate of the general plan.
Well, what would be an alternative form to serve disadvantaged legacy communities on 2C?
Well, it wouldn't be hooking up to a public system.
Doesn't that seem a little bit discriminatory?
Discriminatory?
We're going to make everybody else do it, but
No, it's not just for them. That's just like especially them. It says are not available and development of treatment plants are unfeasible. Allow for alternative forms of wastewater treatment for everyone, but especially in disadvantaged legacy communities.
Seems to me that if it makes sense for a development to hook into the public sewage provider,
They should.
they will do it.
They should.
And if it doesn't make sense for them to do it for whatever reason, it's too far away, the lateral's gonna cost too much, there could be any number of reasons, and it's economically better for them and for the people who are gonna buy into the development.
What about economically or environmentally for the people around the new development that are already hooked up and yet they now have wells and septic systems? Or maybe they have wells and wastewater.
This is not dealing with wells, this is septic.
Is that,
This is just,
right, so
Purely
let's say
septic.
that they're on wastewater, they've got wells, and all of a sudden you've got a neighborhood of septic systems all around them.
Well, I think there are rules about when you can put those in and when you can't.
yeah, they'd have to meet whatever
have
standards
to
are in
meet
place
standards.
for new septic systems.
With,
You know, if the purpose of the policy is to direct new development to connect to public sewer in the community areas where public sewer is available. If you don't think that's appropriate, you think that if that should be more of a market decision, then we should just strike the policy.
I'm good with encouraging them all to do that, but to prohibit, that doesn't even leave a door open to look at all avenues and directions that this could go in. It just, boom, it brings it to a dead stop no matter what, which could bring a lot of projects to a dead end. So the word prohibit is where I'm hung up, but as far as saying, I want people to go that direction, because I do believe if we're putting in a new project, we should be looking at getting everybody on this service. But I just, that word prohibit just does not work for me.
it doesn't work for me for the reasons I'd stated before, and picking up on what Kelly just said, with respect to the economic feasibility of something or economic factors, by not prohibiting it, it makes the provider, CCWD or whomever, if they want those customers, to make it economically feasible. It gives them a reason to make it economically feasible in order to attract those new customers. With 2A, it does not. There is no incentive. It balances the scales a little bit.
So how would you like to, I mean, there's some consensus here, how would you want to have this reworded?
How about encourage connection to public sewage treatment and disposal systems where they are available and have the capacity to serve new connections?
Okay, you want to put in discretionary projects into that too? Or does that,
It doesn't really matter at this point if we're just encouraging it. You know, so if there is a discretionary project and there was some concern about should they connect, and said, yeah, you should connect. Or if there was maybe a grant application or something for extension of public sewer line, we could say, hey, yeah, extension of this public sewer, part of the water or sewer district's capital improvement plan. We have a policy here that says, yeah, we want them to connect, so it's consistent. I think that maybe gets more to, and then allow the individual projects the flexibility to connect if it's feasible or not, if it works, and they can meet the standards for on-site
okay,
disposal.
so all you've done is take out and prohibit and put encourage.
Mm-hmm.
And if you, after disposal systems are, if you insert the word reasonably, then you've got a complete thought there that makes sense to me. Agree?
How would it then read?
It would read, encourage new septic systems in areas where sewage treatment and disposal systems are reasonably available and have the capacity to serve new connections.
No, because we don't want to encourage septic systems. Or encourage connection to public sewage treatment and disposal systems
There you go.
where they are available and have the capacity to serve new connections.
Oh, I'm sorry. Encourage, again, please?
Encourage connection to public sewage treatment and disposal systems
You're right.
Yep.
where they are available and have the public,
Yeah.
or where
Right.
they are.
I wasn't looking at the entire language. You're absolutely right.
I think that's fine.
Okay.
I agree with that.
Okay, my next one is 2.9. Which doesn't look to me to be a public facilities and service provision. I'm not too sure what focusing growth really means. Does that mean we're going to prohibit growth elsewhere? I'm not too sure what reliant upon public water and public sewer means here. Because if the public water and sewer aren't there now, the growth can't be reliant on it. Maybe it means focused growth where public water and sewer will be required. And I think that we dealt with this same issue, or one very close to it, in the land use element. And in fact, it was the LU 3.4 that Peter had read earlier, of which I happen to have copies, that I think was a subject of some considerable discussion.
Which one on here?
3.4.
And this looks to me like a land use issue that we've already covered.
I think the difference, and the intent here was that, was the coordinating with the public service providers and LAFCO. So that they're not off doing their own thing, so we're going to extend water over here, and we're saying, well, no, we want it over here. Here's the areas where we want to see the growth occur. So the key here is to coordinate with the public service providers and LAFCO. And maybe we just need to more focus on that phrase rather than the rest of it. It's intended to sort of tie back to 3.4, LU 3.4.
Because the way it reads, it reads like we're going to be focusing growth. That's what the focus, if, as it were, is of 2.9. And that's where I had the major problem. And actually, when I think about it, 3.4 in LU looks more like a public facilities and services.
Well, this is where they interact, interlink, and I think ultimately it's a land use issue. But it's tied to public facilities and services, obviously, and there's maybe some little bit of redundancy, but I think it's sort of a critical issue.
I didn't have an issue. I mean, I see what you're talking about, but since they used the word focus and they didn't say it's a demand, it didn't bother me too much.
Well, I'm glad,
What if we tie it back to 3.4
Yeah.
and maybe the focus growth,
well, the growth, if we make growth, meaning growth of the system, of improvements in the system.
Well, suppose you said coordinate with public service providers in LAFCO where growth will be reliant upon public water, et cetera. If the focus, as it were, was to coordination,
yeah, that works.
That works for me.
Can you give me that language, please?
Coordinate with public service providers in LAFCO where growth will be reliant,
Scratching the word focus and
et
putting it
cetera.
where.
Um,
So,
And you can actually strike the last
That's what I was thinking.
phrase, and where reliable and adequate are available, because you're really talking about the coordination.
Put a period after communities.
Yeah. And where it says water and public sewer, 2 areas, it should be in areas.
Coordinate with public service.
So it would read coordinate with public service providers and LAFCO, where growth will be reliant upon public water and public sewer in areas in and around existing communities, period.
I'm good
Okay.
with that.
okay. Now, tell me what that means. What does coordinate mean in this context?
Meeting with them, reviewing their capital improvement plans, ensuring that when LAFCO makes a decision to approve an annexation, that it's in an area that's consistent with our general plan. My experience for the longest time is that special districts and LAFCO have not worked with the county. They've just done their own thing. And this is saying, we want you to work with us. And as state law actually requires it, but it's something that hasn't really been done that regularly here in the past.
Do you think this language gets to that?
Yes. I mean, there's not a lot of teeth, but at least it's a statement that says, we're going to work with these districts, and we expect them to work with us.
I agree.
And I think that's reasonable.
Okay.
My next question is on page 16 and PF 3.2. And
I have a
my-
little one before that, and that is just a, on the goal.
Couldn't hear you, Vaughn.
On the goal, PF-3?
Before we go to 3, did we want to go, we've been sort of looking at the implementation measures concurrently with the
And we should do
the
that.
goals.
Thank
Do
you,
want to
Peter.
jump to
Yes.
the measure under
Yes.
2?
Oh,
And then after we do this, I think we should see if there's comments from the public after we do this one. So
we're
what
on
page was that on?
20.
20. Thank you
Yeah,
for that
2A.
reminder.
So,
Or maybe I was hoping that no changes were necessary.
No, that could
So
happen.
we're on implementation measures.
Yes.
Okay, on the 1A1, the level of service thresholds. My only question is whether before the last word, which is development, it should be modified by either the word such or new, because that's what we're talking about.
You're on PF, where are you at?
1A,
1A1?
1A1.
Yeah, new would work there.
And
Or such.
And where was that again?
Yeah.
This was the new sentence, or the new part that was added.
Special districts and county departments.
So we're talking about new development and other public facilities and services necessary to provide service to development and to such development.
now, I'm lost.
I'm totally lost.
sorry.
We sort of jumped back to
Oh, I see it,
the
okay.
changes I made to
I
Oh,
1.
that's,
1A1.
okay, hang on. There it is. Thank you. And your suggestion is what now?
Before the last word, where it just says to development, should be to such development, because we're talking about new development in the first part of the sentence, that's all.
To the development,
Or to the development.
to the development.
What's the
Got it.
pleasure of the commission? Such the new.
Doesn't matter.
I think the.
The? Okay. That it is.
On the next one, I think there's a typo, 1A2, where it
need
says
an F.
review options and adopt methods or maintaining, or should be for.
Four.
Yeah. My keyboard, the F,
Doesn't
doesn't
go,
always
yeah.
go, and so that's a common thing.
You've worn it out.
I don't know, it was that way when I started. We're,
And I don't have anything else until PF-2B on page 20.
I'm trying to find, okay.
It's 1A2,
Methods four,
first
yeah.
sentence.
There it is.
Okay, so I had 2A, let me see.
Go ahead.
Well, it's just a typo. The last sentence, to affect a district's ability, should be district, T apostrophe S.
Yep.
And I have nothing else till 2H.
All right, so let's go on to 2A.
The word appraised should be apprised.
Okay,
Yeah, where is that?
keep going.
2F?
2H.
H.
Oh,
Okay, I thought you said
2H. I did too, 2H. Oh, okay.
And nothing else until 2M.
I wanted to, can I go back just a bit?
Absolutely.
Where is the phrase?
Right
Oh, there
here.
it is, apprised.
Right.
On 2E,
Mhm.
wish I had made better notes. I have a question mark there. And I'm-
So the issue here is that we have projects that they get approved, there's a commitment from the water or sewer provider that they can serve it, and then it sort of languishes for a long time for whatever reason. Under the MAP Act, there are provisions that the MAP expires over a certain time, but not all projects do that. And sometimes it creates problems for the district to know, well, is the project going to go forward or not? And so the purpose of this measure is to sort of establish a time frame that if you don't move forward with the project, you may give up those commitments for water and sewer.
Because they're holding them up.
They're holding up for someone else. And that's the purpose of that measure.
Okay. And then on 2H, and then I have a reference to 2I. Revised, okay, landscaping standards. Then on 2I, I'm good with that. I actually did some research on that and I cleared my way. Sorry, didn't mean to drag you backwards.
Okay, I just caught another one I missed in 2F, the same appraised, should be apprised issue.
Okay.
Okay.
And on 2M, it says continue groundwater monitoring efforts and expand it where is feasible. The it should be them.
Anything else?
No.
Okay. Shall we, anyone in the public would like to talk about our discussion up to date? Thank you for joining us.
Vicki Mills, Vallecito. Back in 1987-88, the board passed an ordinance that said that if public sewer was available, you had to hook up. You might want to check if that's still, because I know that's still in effect. So it would prohibit, because of that ordinance, anybody doing a septic system where the sewer is available.
I'm sorry, Vicki, can I get you to repeat yourself? What ordinance?
She didn't have a number. She
I
just
don't
said
have a
it was in
number. I know it was
97.
done in 87, 88, when the Vallecito Sewer Project was done. The County Board of Supervisors passed an ordinance that said if public sewer was available, you had to hook up. No ifs, ands, buts about it. So you might want to check and see, I mean, I know that ordinance is still in force because there are people in Vallecito who wanted to get out of the sewer project because they had enough land to do their own sewer system, their own septic tank, and the county told them no. So that ordinance is still on the books.
You think it's late 80s?
I know it's late 80s.
There are certain scenarios, if you are in the area where the sewer laterals were run and the mains through the Arnold Highway 4 area into Avery, that when the grant was received by CCWD, it specifically states those properties have to go onto the sewer system. That is a true statement, but it also said in the grant that we need to look at CCW's grant. It also stated that they could not take on other people until that section was completed because those hookups were reserved for those properties that weren't built out. So need to be very careful when you're going to push somebody into something when you have a grant out there that stated these properties have to be finished first, but now you're prohibiting somebody else and making them come on.
I'm just saying that ordinance is on the books
So
still.
I think we should, we'll look into it.
Yeah, I
and
think
see-
we need to look into
So-
it big time.
So
Definitely.
we have an ordinance on the books, and that's the current policy of the county. The general plan is the direction the county wants to go. And if this policy is adopted by the board could then amend that ordinance to say, we no longer want to require that. And that would be consistent with the general plan. So the policy question is, do we want to go with the current policy of the county, which is established by that ordinance, or do we want to amend that ordinance? We want to put something in the general plan that says, we don't want to require that. Now, there may be other extenuating circumstances of why that, specifically, is it everywhere? Is it just Vallecito? I don't know the details of that.
It was,
Yeah,
they
I
just did
imagine
it in
probably
general.
In general. And I, that the original policy language was essentially reflecting that policy of the county.
Okay, then do we need to go back to that provision, I forget the number, and indicate that we need to look at existing ordinances?
Well, that would be
That are-
an implementation measure that would say, review and revise as necessary, ordinances.
Ordinances that don't reflect this policy.
Right.
Do we need to include that as an IM?
If you think that,
Well, alternatively, does somebody have to come before us and say,
we would have to amend that ordinance in order to allow someone to put in a septic system where they otherwise, if that's the case, and I'm not familiar with that ordinance, it hasn't come up as an issue since I've been here. But if that's the ordinance on the books, that's what's required, regardless of what we say in the general plan right now.
correct, so that's why I'm saying,
So-
proactively, should this commission be looking at ordinances that are inconsistent and change them before somebody comes up to
Well,
us?
and that's something that we will be doing as sort of the next phase of implementation of the general plan once it's adopted is, okay, where do we need to amend our ordinances? Where are they inconsistent with the direction we want to go? And if, that would be one of those.
Okay, so we don't need to say in a measure
It
that we're going to do that because
depends on how critical, if we want to separate it out as a specific task we want to do, then it would be wise to put it in there. If it's, well, we'll sort of get that, eventually we'll get to it. Once we adopt the general plan, my next task will be to go through all these implementation measures, somehow prioritize them, take them to the board and say, what do you want me to work on next? What are our top priorities? And I'll have my recommendation to them. They can't all be done the first year. And so we'll be, taking those as we can and not knocking them off one at a time. And that may fall, you know, if it's not specifically stated, it won't sort of get there on, you know, as a check mark. You know, it may come up somewhere along the line and say, oh, we need to look at this. So just the practicality of amending that ordinance, it probably wouldn't come up unless there was a specific project that said, well, you know, we want to go with what the general plan says, and you need to amend your ordinance to bring it into compliance. And we say, oh, you're right, we do. Or it just sort of goes along for a while, and we finally get to it, and we say, okay, well, you know, here's something we need to look at.
Okay, but if Vicki hadn't brought that up just now, we might not have thought of it.
Right.
Okay, and you might not have thought of it when you go to the board and say, okay, general plan's done, what do you want me to work on? Whereas knowing about it, you would now say, look, I've got a few ordinances here that are about 30 years old, and they are inconsistent with general plan. Here's my list of priorities. Do you agree with me?
Right.
Okay, so now that goes on your list,
Right.
because that does affect a lot of people, potentially a lot of people. So your task will be then to go through all the ordinances and see what looks stale and out of place, and present them to the board as what you think your priorities should be.
That's right.
When we're approving projects like this, we do talk with the water companies if there's a sewer project in the area and find out what their agreements are for land in and around those, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that's all I needed to hear.
Thank you, Vicki.
Well, in the past, I think we've had implementation measures that read something like, review existing ordinances on X subject. And maybe we should say something like, review ordinance regarding new septic systems where public sewage services are available, for
Exactly.
consistency with the general plan, just as an implementation measure.
If it's in there as an implementation measure, it kind of is puts
Sure
it on the
raises it.
to-do list.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're going to plug that in?
Yeah, we could add that as a new measure to N. Review existing ordinances.
This would be under wastewater IMs.
Correct.
Well, right, yeah, on page 22.
Right, or it's, yeah, add a new one.
2N.
To N.
So is there some consensus to add that?
Yes. Please.
All right.
No, I don't have any exact language for that.
How about review existing ordinances relating to mandatory connections to public sewer and amend as necessary?
And that would be
A new measure.
2N as a neighbor.
PF2N as in Nancy.
Nancy.
So there's some consensus there. I'm in favor of the existing ordinance. You too, huh, Ted?
Yep.
Yeah. We're outvoted here, so. Moving on. Is there anything else on the implementation measures?
For two.
Pardon me?
For twos. For the twos.
For the twos. Because then we'll be going back to the next policies
Number
of
3.
energy and solid waste, right?
Right. And you had something on the goal of health?
Well, only that, it seems like we don't usually have a community that, you know, it's in here a couple of times. What if we just said, you know, embrace the use of alternative forms of energy and implement and maintain cost-effective integrated solid waste management system or systems emphasizing waste reduction and recycling? Just to be consistent with the other.
I'm fine with that.
What was the change?
It would just read, embrace the use of alternative forms of energy and implement and maintain cost-effective integrated solid waste management systems emphasizing waste reduction and recycling.
So you just get rid of the first three words and change
Yes,
the...
and a little bit
Got
of
it.
tense changes
Grammatical
on the other ones, yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Next, who's got,
I was on 3.2.
okay?
My only comment there is the implementation measures don't seem to fit the policy.
Three C and 3D.
I think 3C does, but 3D, maybe not.
Wait a minute, I forgot what the policy was.
Well, 3C seems to be on target.
I would strike 3D from that one.
Projects.
3D is off target, you're right. Okay, looking at 3D then, it's applicable still to 3.1, correct? I mean, it still has a home?
Well, it's specific to 3.3. I'm not sure how does it fit 3.1.
It's a new development. Let's see.
Probably doesn't fit so well in 3.1.
No. It's really. I think it's specific to 3.3 only.
Isolated to 3.3?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Anything else?
On 3B, no, I'm on,
Or we're going to the implementation?
well, I just have a question.
On the implementation or the
Yes,
policies?
On the implementation,
Okay.
if we're through with
I
policies.
think we're done with policies. Let's move to, and what page is that? Just,
24,
thank you.
oops, 24 on
23.
that last week's version, so it's 23 this
Okay.
week.
All right.
Okay, so amend the code to recognize and permit alternative full vehicle charging stations. What would we be giving incentives for on that?
What number are you on?
PF3B.
B. Thank you.
Three D,
B,
B.
to boy.
fine, okay.
Bravo. Well, the incentives might be, as suggested there, parking standard reductions. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head, but we might come up with something. I'm sure there's other jurisdictions that have addressed this that we could borrow from. That I just haven't looked, researched in detail what we might do.
I thought it was off.
My 3B issue, and maybe we're saying the same thing, do we have, what's in the code now that interferes with this kind of an effort? First question. Secondly, reducing parking space size, do you really mean parking space numbers? The parking space size kind of is what it is because cars are what they are.
Mm-hmm.
Can you realistically reduce parking space numbers to accommodate this feature that people might be interested in?
Yeah.
Or maybe could it perhaps be something with the building code, or a setback, or,
Yeah,
I
there
mean,
could
a
be-
number of
yeah.
things that
I would
might-
just strike that example.
Yeah. I mean, it could be a number of things that, but for this tiny little variance, that this charging station could be accommodated.
So just leave it open to something
Whatever
that
it
might come
might
up. And it might be one of those landscaping things that we talked about way back in
Right.
whatever other
Sure.
element that was.
Like-
Okay.
Yeah, so instead of having a 5-foot landscape buffer, you reduce it down because that's going to be encroaching in the landscape.
Like 3 or something.
Okay, I really had a 3A issue, but it's kind of a broad question, because it reads just like what my memory tells me we already addressed in, I think it's conservation element. It reads just the same. Am I,
Well, it could be
Having a
an
senior
example.
moment here?
No, it could be an example of sort of the crossover. You just want to make sure you identify it in
well, I
both.
know that we do cross over from time to time, but it looks like it's just copy and paste virtually. I thought we pretty well addressed it in conservation.
I don't have a problem with it being in there.
I'm wondering if we actually moved it from conservation to here. I just forgot to, no?
We could have done that. Moved it in here from conservation.
So, conservation open space policy, or measure 5E reads, modify the county's development standards and zoning ordinance to provide incentives for providing alternative energy producing facilities compatible with surrounding uses, such as solar arrays in parking lots that serve to provide shade and energy production. Coordinate with and support state and federal programs that assist landowners in energy conservation and production. That's the only thing that I can see that sort of resembles this.
So could we even just cite that here, COS 5E? Showing the relationship?
Yeah?
What was that number, Con?
I think, well, I don't know, this says
COS 5E.
just like we did with the land
Okay.
use citing.
Thank you.
You're going to do what with this now?
We're going to cite.
Cite the
over
conservation
the
element, where
conservation
there's
element.
similar,
Fine.
yeah.
Well, I think we also just went through the Williamson Act issue in solar easements, and I think we changed language
Well, I did,
very
that,
recently.
I'm reminded of that too, in the same element.
I think it was actually in the resource production element, which I now.
I think you're right.
Amend the county code to incorporate required findings and procedures for implementing state legislation and DOC requirements relative to solar use easements and installations affecting Williamson Act contracts.
So does that match?
So then this one says basically the same thing,
Mhm.
right? It's just acknowledging that recent legislation related to solar easements on Williamson Act contracts.
So it's probably not necessary to have that language in this policy as well. One of the things that I had to do when I first started working on the draft was there were a lot of duplicate policies from one element to another, and I tried to say, okay, we don't need to repeat it, and I may have missed one or two.
Okay.
So I think that the language that we adopted with the under ag resources in the resource production element is one we've sort of worked on, so I think that's probably the language we should keep, and we could just sort of strike the last phrase in this measure here. I think it's fully,
Striking and to incorporate.
yeah.
And with respect to the other, you are going to, how are you going to reference the,
Where we say where it implements, on the next, top next page, it implements policy PF 3.1, we can add COS 5E to that. And then I will add PF 3A to the changes in conservation open space.
Okay.
Well, I did have another question on 3A, where it refers to geothermal heating for buildings. 'Cause I thought that we only had one geothermal source in the whole county, which was down around Valley Springs. And I don't know if it's even practical to do anything with that.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Kelly. Can you say that again?
I think that there's only one geothermal source in the whole county, down at Valley Springs.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, well, this acknowledges that whether the practicality exists or not, that in the famous words here, we let the market determine that, wouldn't we? If it would be exploited for energy use?
It just struck me as being a general plan provision that's pretty narrow in application.
Well, again, we've been sort of getting rid of some of the examples that are, we could just strike the whole parenthetical phrase there. It's really sort of unnecessary.
Strike it?
I'm fine with it.
Yep.
I guess it's stricken.
But we've covered it in 2 other places.
Okay, what were those implementation measures that you were adding here?
COS 5E,
CWS 5E,
That was it?
that was it.
Okay.
I suppose we could add the,
Public resources?
oh, wait a second. No, that's, that's an implementation measure, not a policy. So.
Ah,
The policies are. Let's see, this 1.3. That wouldn't necessarily, 1.3 doesn't really apply. It's about use of vegetation for energy production.
so there
If
really
you
isn't
might.
a,
Let me go back and look at the policies and I'll
See if
add
there's-
those
okay.
that, I mean, I don't think it's that critical.
you're looking at policies that,
So policies in the conservation open space that
That
was
support
similar
the-
to, that supported 5E. There was conservation open space policies 1.3, 4.7, and 4.8. And
but 5E is an implementation measure, so Peter wants to tie it to a policy rather than to a implementation measure in the conservation open
7,
space.
4.8. So I'll review those and add the appropriate policies that this would also implement from the conservation, just to make sure that the cross-reference is made. And I'll also go, vice versa on that.
okay, I need to make a big note here that says, Peter to look at.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you want me to bring those back just so you can review them, or you
I don't
trust me
think
to do that
I trust
cross-reference?
you, Peter. I trust you.
Well, this is coming back to us because of all the other little changes, so you're just going to show us what you found at some point, right? Or do you think we're going to be done today? And
I hope we'll be done today.
Well, I thought we would be done with the edits, but then we'd have to go back and look at,
Well, I think it
unless
would
there's
be in
some
the minutes again.
Yeah, it would be in the
In the
minutes.
minutes, and then
I mean,
that-
so far, there hasn't been anything that sort of left hanging.
Right.
We've made edits.
So
and
it'd be
we
like
can
the
go-
others. It'd
yeah.
be in the minutes, and we'd have an opportunity when the
If
minutes
there's
are
something that you
reviewed.
want me to bring back that we're not really
not yet.
established yet, but
Right.
I'll do that cross-referencing.
I trust you.
Me too. So any other,
On
Issues?
3F,
Uh-huh.
on page 23, it says support programs that provide incentives, including revisions to the zoning ordinance, and then it goes on. And it struck me that revisions to the zoning ordinance doesn't strike me as being an
an
incentive.
incentive? Yeah.
And would it be better to just delete the language, including revisions to the zoning ordinance, and then say something, another sentence such as, adopt appropriate revisions to the zoning ordinance to facilitate alternative energy systems? Assuming that,
I think we already have that in 3A. Amend the zoning ordinance to encourage incorporation of solar, wind, and other alternative energy infrastructure and project design.
So we don't really even need it.
so we could just
Right.
take it out of here.
Yeah.
So we're striking
including revisions to the zoning ordinance.
All right, so before we...
Oh, wait a second. I had a 3C, kind of a question on this adopting a construction demolition debris diversion ordinance. Do you know of one that we can copy and paste?
Yes.
Good.
Most counties already have one. I think we already actually may have one in the works.
Thank you.
All right, so before we go back to page 16, or actually, are there any comments from the public on? No, okay. Before we go back to page 16 for law enforcement, do you want a short break?
Sure.
So, back at 20 till 11, we are recessed. All right, so we are back in session from our recess, and we are page 16, goals and policies for law enforcement. You had some, Peter, do you want to?
Nothing in the goals.
Oh, that's
policies,
right,
just in
it's on the implementation. We already made one change, wasn't that here? No, that was in the introduction.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
I need to go and grab this.
We are at implementation measures?
No,
Laura?
No, we're on the goal and policies
Page
for
16.
law enforcement.
Yes.
Right. Any comments?
None from me.
Anyone? So let's go to the implementation measures,
So 4C and 4D.
which is page
page
23.
24 of the new document.
Hang
Thought
on.
I had the new document. Well, whatever. I've got law enforcement emergencies.
Well, it starts on 23,
Okay.
but
there.
4C and 4D are on 24.
Okay.
What I would recommend, based on my conversation with Captain Macedo, is that we strike the first portion of 4C, so it reads as follows. And basically strike the first line, first half of the second line up to including, and it reads, establish a development impact fee to fund capital costs, and the rest of it stays the same. That's what the sheriff would like to see,
Okay.
that we actually have one, not just consider it, not investigate it, but we're going to establish it.
Okay.
That's his request. And then 4D, pretty much the same, just install facilities that create or enhance voice and data communications.
Okay.
Any-
Hang on, because I had a note about 4B looking the same to me as 4A. Why did I have that?
Staffing levels. Oh, staffing levels.
No, 4A is staffing levels.
And so is the 4.
One is to establish what the need for those levels
And
are.
that's to monitor
And then
it.
the other one is to monitor it, to make sure that we're
Keeping on
maintaining,
top.
keeping on top of it.
Okay,
Maybe a little redundant, but
in that case, I'm done.
All right, we all good with that? Shall we go back to page 17,
17.
emergency services? I had, again, the comment about just being consistent and striking a community. And then instead, I'm seeing here what I was suggesting. Oh, maybe it was just say prepare for and, no,
Respond to.
yeah, something. It's a little,
Prepare for, be able to respond to, and be able to recover from.
Yeah, that would work.
Coordination.
Prefer
That's fine.
for,
yeah,
be able to, and
Prepare for and respond to.
No, be able to respond to and be able to recover from.
or we could just say be able to respond to and recover from.
Mhm.
yeah, get rid of a be able.
Mhm.
Okay. Any other comments on emergency services? Shall we go to implementation, which is page 24, 5A and 5B?
I'm good.
1 second, please. Oh, a question. Who is MAC?
Multi-agency.
Multi-agency
Yeah,
coordination.
yeah, but, I mean, who are they?
It is,
Well, an example would be when a
Sheriff,
fire.
CAO.
during the fire, we
OES
had sheriff,
and-
CAO, state agencies. It was basically the coordinating team that was responding to the
Might be
emergency.
hospitals, medical people, environmental health.
This is an agency that exists, it's a group that exists and comes alive in a situation like this?
Yes.
Right.
Okay. I understand.
All right, so going back to page 17, other services and facility, oh no, I'm sorry, crime prevention. And I had the same, it's just striking communities design and just put discourage crime and minimize demands on law enforcement resources.
And your suggestion is what now?
Strike communities design too, and just start
Oh,
with
just,
discourage,
right,
yeah.
okay.
All right, does anybody else have anything on crime prevention?
No.
No,
Okay, if we looked at the implementation measures, anything on 6A or 6B?
no.
Don't know yet, hold on 1 second.
Okay,
Yeah, there's the wrong word on 6A, the top of page 25, maintains a line of sight. S-I-T-E should be S-I-G-H-T.
right. All right. Anything else? Okay. Goals and policies, back to page 17, other services and facilities. I had
1 second.
one on page 18.
I have majors. I wanted, so one of the things that other services and facilities that, I was wondering if we shouldn't be addressing cell phone tower expansions because we're so weak in that area in our county when it comes to public safety as far as if there's a fire. They're not manning the towers like they used to for CAL FIRE. They just don't have the funding for it anymore. But we don't have anything that addresses cell tower expansion, and that is, they keep pushing it back on us, saying that's our means of communication. People call in smoke now from their cell phones. And should we be looking at adding a provision for cell phone tower expansions?
So the goal says effective communications, so I think it's in the goal. Now, the one thing that the sheriff is concerned about that was included in PF4D, emergency communications, that they want to make sure that they have facilities that they can communicate, that emergency services can communicate and not rely on cell phones. So that's sort of a separate issue. Now, the public is relying on cell phones pretty much. And so that may be what the issue you're concerned about.
I
here
am
with
concerned because we're
communications.
seeing a lot of permit applications come through too, notices of,
Because the county has no control or authority over private communications companies and their ability to put up towers. It's based on what they think is marketable, and we've got a lot of applications right now for new and expanded towers.
Would that be covered in 7.5? Work with franchisees that provide cable service or other telecommunications facilities?
On
which
7
number
what?
was that?
PF 7.5?
I thought so.
Just a second.
Why don't I have 7.5?
It's the very last one
Those
on
were
page
in-
18.
Yeah, and I don't know if those were in the first
Well-
first draft that you saw 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago.
May I, let me ask you this question. The other measure that you mentioned with respect to emergency services, they need to expand their ability to communicate,
Yes.
okay?
And so something that the sheriff has or Captain Macedo has asked that new development does an analysis of if a deputy is in this this project area, can they communicate? Can they receive radio communication from headquarters or from other deputies in the field? And same with fire protection personnel. And if they don't, then the developer may have to install some kind of communication facility.
Okay.
And that's what they wanted. That's what
I get it. No, that's,
4D was
they're looking
about.
at a map and to the range, and, you know, you've got this development out here, and we get out there and we're not gonna be able to talk to anybody.
Right,
Fine.
right.
Is it feasible to link that goal to the goal that Lisa's talking about, which is private cell phone stuff? And you're right, the private cell phone people put up towers where they think they can make a dollar off of it. Can we include a measure that says where a tower is being located for purposes of the emergency services, to encourage, if you will, private providers to look at that facility for purposes of expanding their network? You're going to build a tower for purposes of emergency services. It doesn't have to be limited to that one
We have a policy,
function.
don't we, for that?
You can say, hey, Verizon, AT&T or whatever, we got a tower going in, do you want a piece of the action? It suddenly becomes more economical for them to
Well,
piggyback on a,
and a lot of communities have said, we could, I mean, it could be a money-making venture for the community. We can lease out tower space to cell companies.
right?
There are some, like probably all familiar with the big county government center in Marin County, Highway 101. So up on a hill, they've got cell towers along the side of it. Incorporated into the architecture, you really can't tell. And so a lot of good jurisdictions go, well, where do we have facilities that are on the top of a hill that would provide great communication capacity, and then contact the cell companies and say, we're willing to lease out some space to you if you want it.
Okay, so you could leave it to, let's say, the developer, through his own initiative.
Maybe what we want to do is add either a measure or a policy that says we want to, look at co-location possibilities and opportunities so that we can increase communication facilities throughout
I
the
thought we
county.
established a policy on that some time back on co-location.
Well, I think our cell phone ordinance talks about that, but it doesn't really address where the county is requiring or putting up its own communication facility.
Well, okay, what Ted's talking about, the same goal could be met in the reverse. A cell phone company has a desire to put up a tower to increase its service range, and we look at that siting as a possibility for us to improve, include a mechanism for our emergency service providers, serving their purposes. So do we have anything in here, or does it make sense to put something in here for us to look at the issue from both sides? We need to have a tower for our purposes. We promote it as an expansion possibility for private company cell phone providers. On the reverse side, when they're putting up something, we look at the possibility of piggybacking on their system for our needs. And maybe one measure can include both of those. One policy or one implementation measure can pick up both concepts.
It's,
Looks like you're drafting.
Yeah.
and I'm fine with what you're saying, David, and I think it's a great idea, but I'm kind of tackling this from a different direction where trying to get these cell towers in is not an easy task. And if it was part of our general plan, I mean, I look at the Butte Fire area where they don't have good cell service out there, and it is a public safety issue. And as far as, and I know we're on public safety, but I'm going to just jump into this anyway. When it comes to tourism, where I'm at, and vacation rentals, when I'm taking calls and I have to tell them that your AT&T phone doesn't service our area, oh, it changes their idea about where they're going to stay. And so it has a severe impact on our economics with tourism, because AT&T is not a big service provider up here, and I would like to see us encouraging getting that in. It services two needs, whether it be tourism, economics, and safety.
On the other hand, Verizon's being very aggressive expanding their system right now, and we've got probably half a dozen applications in process right now for new or expanded Verizon towers.
Verizon's not even having ownership of their tower sites anymore. American Tower has taken over all of their agreements, and I mean, it's very interesting how that process is unfolding, but finding new locations is not easy, because who wants to look at a cell tower in their backyard? So, I mean, I would,
You know, they've got, we're going to be looking at this tree thing, the tree cell phone towers. It's pretty common now, but what I'm suggesting, I think, Lisa, addresses your issue. Where a cell phone company, let's say Verizon, because they're pretty active, is talking to us about, we want to put up a tower. We look at that tower as a possibility to serve our needs, and we piggyback on their effort. And vice versa, if we've got a need for a tower to serve an area for emergency purposes, we proactively contact the cell phone providers and say, we have a need for a tower in this particular area, which also is a poor service area cell phone wise. Is anybody out there interested? And you contact Verizon because they've already shown an interest in expanding in the area, and say, do you want in on this tower? AT&T, whomever. Well, we don't pick and choose. We don't.
Is that a problem with soliciting somebody else to pay for it?
Well, that's what you're doing. You're saying, we need a tower. You need it. You can benefit from this tower. So it's a shared cost arrangement, or we lease back to them, or they lease to us, or whatever.
I guess the thing that was bothering me is somebody might interpret that as us saying, we'll give you your permit if you'll pay for part of the cost. That's kind of sneaking in the back door.
Well, I don't know, Ted. I understand your concern. I understand the dynamic of what you're talking about there. On the one side, it wouldn't be that at all, because it would be, we're going to put up a tower. Do you want in on it? Yes or no? So there's no quid pro quo.
The way it is now, where people have to allow co-location.
The way it is now, they have to allow co-location?
Yeah.
What do you
No.
mean?
If people are going to put in a tower someplace down the road, and they have to allow other agencies to use it.
well, CAL FIRE has a tower, and they told the ham radio people they have to remove theirs.
Yeah.
So that's not necessarily true. I mean, and this gets down to emergency services, because the ham radio operators
Keep going a little
helped
longer.
out in the fire, but now they don't want to share a tower anymore. So we don't have co-sharing that's thinking about our public safety, as far as I'm concerned. And I would love to see that. But I'm dressing more, I mean, when I'm reading this 7.5 and other telecommunication facilities, I would like it to address towers as well.
Peter's working on something.
Well,
We're
So-
about to be enlightened.
Yeah, let me throw this out just for, and it probably could use some wordsmithing. Under policy, the new policy that says support co-location of communication systems to facilitate private cellular service and emergency communication.
yeah,
Policy.
where would you put that now?
That would be new policy,
7.6.
PF 7.6.
Okay,
Read that
And
one
then-
more time, please.
Support co-location of communication systems to facilitate private cellular service and emergency communication. General policy.
Makes me happy.
The measure would be 7E, and I was playing around with language, but require review of new cellular communication towers by emergency service agencies and coordinate with cell companies when new towers are installed to facilitate co-location.
and that would be policy what?
That would be
Is that it?
measure 7E.
On page 25.
Okay, require new towers.
Require review of new cellular communication towers by emergency service agencies and coordinate with cell companies when new towers are installed either by the county or by agencies
Or just install.
Coordinate with,
or installed.
that
And
last,
coordinate with cellular companies when new towers are installed to facilitate co-location. So sort of
Good.
both directions. You good with that?
right. Now, I like fine.
Okay.
When we're done with that, then we need to look at 7.5 with an eye towards something else.
Okay.
Wait, well, let's hold on.
Thank you, Peter.
PF 7.5. Work with franchisees that provide
What page
cable
is this
service, et cetera, et cetera,
18.
to extend services to underserved areas when entering into new or updated franchise agreements. It sounds like a bit of a, and I see the smile coming on your face, Peter, because you know what I'm going to say. It sounds like you want this tower over here, we've got an underserved area over here, pony up. We'll give you this if you give us that.
Sure, why not? I mean, they're entering an agreement with the county. We want to make sure that the county gets the best service possible out of, why not negotiate a little bit?
Look,
Is extortion a dirty word?
we had this discussion at our last meeting, and I brought the same issue up when it came to cable companies.
Right.
Look, we're giving them a franchise, and we ought to get something out of it, like, extend your lines.
Right.
Okay. Bill McManus brought up a good point. It's not economically feasible because of the
Well, and
spread.
that's going to be part of the negotiation, like, just don't say, okay, fine, sign on the line, you're our franchisee, but let's look at it a little bit more closely. What can the county get out of this? We're not going to, if we say you need to serve Sheep Ranch, they're going to say, I'm sorry, we're not interested.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. I want it on the cable companies too, and I think I think it did not get picked up there. Does this cover everybody?
Well, it says cable service, provide cable service,
All right,
or other telecommunication facilities.
that's what I think they're covered.
Yes, but this says when provide cable service and others to extend services to underserved areas when entering into a new or updated franchise agreement.
Right.
So cable companies have to renew their franchise agreement how often?
I don't know.
Okay, but this then covers our ability to say, come on, you haven't done anything to expand your service under the previous agreement. We're going to require it under this one?
That's the intent. I don't know how much leverage we actually have, but at least we give it
Can put it on the table.
Okay.
a good college try.
Okay, then I like it.
Okay.
Okay.
So I've got a recommendation on 7.2, beginning with the second sentence, rather than create a trained labor pool. If we said develop a skilled workforce, seems to me that's more than just creating a trained labor pool. We want to provide more skills for our people. So it would say, and private institutions to develop a skilled workforce, and then I would like to add, to enhance employment opportunities to support economic development. I don't know, maybe you don't need that, but part of
To enhance.
employment opportunities. I mean, if you're creating a skilled workforce, you're creating people with greater skills, it's going to make them more employable.
I'm good with that, Fawn.
I'm fine with it.
Okay.
Would it be to support or and support? Create
Oh,
a train to
enhance
create-
employment opportunities to support economic development. Or maybe yeah, because there's really two goals. One we, okay.
Yeah.
This
So
is
then-
really a very broad concept that you could apply to a lot of different aspects of the county. And this is where we kind of miss an economic development element.
Well, I think it's something that we've talked about for a while. I know that, one of my first weeks here, there was a meeting with Delta College that Supervisor Edson had put together, and trying to work with them. We have limited authority. We can't force a district to put facilities here, but certainly if Delta College or Columbia College wants to add a satellite location, yeah, we want to support that. Go for it. That's
Absolutely.
consistent with our goals and policies of the general plan. So, and if they're school districts, they're pretty autonomous and independent, but there could be something where we can work together on something. It is very broad. There's no real specifics there, but we certainly want that and need that. And to the degree that we can support it, it's one of those sort of broad goal statements, but I think it's worth having in there.
So I
Okay.
would also recommend a change on one of the measures on page 25, which is 7B. And again, instead of calling it job training, I'd call it workforce development. And in the first sentence, it's not the inventory board, it's the investment board.
I'm sorry, I'm on the
What-
wrong.
what-
Did you say D delta?
B as in boy.
Okay. Support?
So change the title to workforce development instead of job training. And then the first sentence, it's the Motherlode Workforce Investment Board, not inventory. And then the last sentence, or continuing where it goes, and other interested organizations to develop, I'd put education and workforce training programs to increase worker skills.
So then, please, to
Increase-
develop education and
Oh, and education and workforce training programs
programs.
to increase worker skills that meet the needs of business, period.
Good here.
Good here.
All right.
Thank you, Fawn.
Very good. So, let's see. To develop education and workforce training programs to increase worker skills.
That meet the needs of business, period.
Okay, so we're striking for training the local labor pool. That. Okay.
All right, so we're good?
Good
When
job.
when we talk about increasing workforce skills and educating people, because it's in this particular element, it necessarily means in the areas covered by this element, does it not? Does it not imply that?
What,
No.
having to do with sanitation and,
Crime prevention and...
I think it's more comprehensive than that.
And that's kind of the issue, is that because it is more comprehensive than that, it's too bad it's not in a whole bunch of other places.
Well, this is under the section of other services
Right.
and facilities. So-
Education,
So it's not focused on,
Workforce.
it's talking about education, it's
Right.
talking about communication.
any comments from the public on the sections that we've just reviewed? No? All right, so I think we're done.
We're not used to this. You don't even know how to say it, do
I
you?
know,
You must be packing up her stuff here.
I know, I know.
All
All right, so you good,
yes,
Peter?
I think we're good.
Okay,
Did we make your 3 o'clock?
yes, we did.
By a long shot.
Yeah. So then, this is another public comment period.
Maybe before we finish this, let me just give you the next steps in the general plan.
Okay.
So the next element, the last element is the safety element.
This isn't the reports part.
No, this is still on discussion of,
Gotcha.
because I want to talk about when our next hearing is going to
Okay.
be on, so we know how far we're going to continue
Okay,
this to.
okay.
I expect to get the review of the safety element from Amy Augustine back tomorrow. But I still have not gone through any of the other comments from the rest of the comment period on that. So I hope to have something on the agenda for the 28th. So it won't be a meeting next week. Nothing ready yet. But I hope to have it ready for the 28th. If not, we do have other things to discuss, and so we'll schedule the general.
We're having a meeting on the 28th, one way or the other.
Yeah. So, but just so we can notice it properly, we will have the safety element noticed for the 28th, but we may have to continue it if it's not ready yet.
But there'll be other items
So
on the 28th.
there will be other items for the
Okay.
28th.
Is it
Right,
possible
right,
that,
Annette? We do have other items for the 28th, yeah.
is it possible that enough of it could be completed that we could whack through half of it, let's say?
Possibly, possibly.
You'd
yeah.
offer that if it?
Sure, that makes sense. Sometimes, there's bits and pieces. that
I can't remember how big it
is.
is right now off the top of my head, but it would be-
It's not a.
I don't think it's a huge one, is it?
Um,
But if we've got other pieces for the 28th and we could chalk through part of it, that would be something.
18 pages. It's just sometimes I don't have like, okay, this section is done. I have everything but one paragraph, and I'm still waiting on information from that. So, but yeah, if we can get a part of it ready to go, then yeah, I want to keep moving as fast as I can. Following that, I'm beginning to set up meetings with groups of people from the communities that we have community plans for, and those will be next up once we finish the safety element. We've got the glossary, which we can probably sort of throw in at some point in time, and the final edits to the technical background report. So that's the last thing we need to do as far as text. Then we've got the community plans and then the land use map.
I have a question about the community plan for my area, Rancho.
Mm-hmm.
There was an article in the paper that said we're not going to have an update of the Rancho community plan. My memory is that there was an update of the Rancho community plan, or that it was revisited and reapproved.
There was some language that I had received from then Supervisor Spellman that I understood to be language that was somehow reviewed by members of the community out there. There wasn't a lot that needed to be done to update that. I mean,
It's a done deal.
It's a done deal. It's
Yeah.
pretty much development. That could easily be incorporated into.
Okay, but the last thing that you know of that purports to be an update is from a couple of years ago.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's where we're at. So we'll bring the safety element as soon as we can, hopefully on the 28th, at least a portion of it, and continue to move forward. And then over the next couple of weeks, I'll be meeting with primarily District 2 community representatives, as well as San Andreas, and try to package the community plans up for review in May and June. Now, I will be gone for 2 weeks in June. I'm actually taking a vacation, so there'll be a little bit of a gap, so you got to take vacation too. And we'll hopefully wrap this up so we get started on the EIR pretty soon.
And
The map, when does that come up?
We decided that was going to be the last thing we were going to address. So as soon as we conclude the community plan documents. And I'm not sure, I think that the main interest, the main focus of most of the community plans was the land use map. So we may end up looking at pieces of the land use map with the community plans. But then, so probably June, July, we'll be looking at the land use map, realistically.
And I'm going to not be at the May 5th or the May 12th meetings, not because I'm on vacation, but I will be working elsewhere,
Help make a living.
so.
You're taking your vacation at the wrong time, because Fawn and I both have things to do that May 12th time period, so could you change your schedule?
No, I'll
You're
that's
going.
May.
Accommodate ours.
Are you gone too, May
June
12th?
is where I'll be gone.
Yeah.
I'm here through May. June is when I'm gone.
No, but are you're
I might be gone that week, the 12th.
the 12th?
So the 12th is a normal, regular
I can
scheduled planning
schedule around
commission.
that Thursday, though.
And we actually had a couple of projects we were hoping to have on the agenda that week. Well, maybe we'll get into reports at this point, because the Toyon dispensary general plan amendment zone change parcel map AUP has been appealed, and it will be heard on the 26th of May, of April.
To the board?
To the board. I think that will set some policy direction for us. We've got 2 other applications that are pending, and had originally planned to have those scheduled for the 28th, but thought we'd wait and see what the board says about that application, because that could change our recommendation based on board policy. So we plan to bring those to you on the 12th.
May 12th?
May 12th.
Okay.
You say there's going to be 2 applications.
They're both from-
Zone change in AUP.
I'll be here.
Okay.
I guess that's really all I have. Unless,
All right.
we want to talk about what the board did on medical cannabis on Tuesday.
Well, maybe we should have the, I don't know.
Public comment first?
Yeah,
Do
I
we
don't
want to take a motion on the safety element as
Oh.
amended?
Sure,
Thank you.
all right. So is there a motion
Not
to,
safety element, I'm sorry.
yeah, the
Public facilities.
yes, public facilities.
Yes, I'll make your motion for the safety element.
No, public facilities.
Public facilities.
And we're
And the
moving
motion-
recommendation
The
to the
move
Board of
is- yeah,
Supervisors.
The motion is to
Yeah,
approve the changes made today and for those edits to the Board of Supervisors.
right.
Seconded.
It's been moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're moving ahead.
Great. Thanks.
So let's have the public comment period, and then there'll be reports, and then we'll be done. Anybody in the public want to address the planning commission? All right, good. Not good, but thank you. On to reports.
So the only thing I'd like to report on is the board's hearing on Tuesday on the urgency ordinance on medical cannabis. The board took no action. It would require a 4/5 vote, and there wasn't a majority of 4 members that could agree on what direction they wanted to go on that. It was a long hearing. We started at 11 and we didn't end until after 6. The intent was to try to freeze where, to sort of allow those that have been given tacit approval previously to continue their operation and continue growing, but sort of freeze things so we wouldn't, authorize any new. And we're not really officially authorizing anything. We're going to register those, but no new cultivation. So there was opposition sort of as far as the ordinance goes on both sides of the aisle. Those that felt the ordinance was too restrictive, they wanted to have more allowance for people that either lost their homes in the fire and moved, or new people that acquired property and had already begun or were in the process of acquiring property. The other side was we don't want it and it should be banned, and don't even allow it at all. And lots of in-betweens of that. So between all that, the board just said we're not ready to adopt any urgency ordinance and to proceed with the direction we gave you previously, and so we're working on that. The request for proposals for the EIR, and we'll be preparing an EIR on that ordinance. There's enough controversy, enough issues that we felt that it was appropriate to prepare an environmental impact report on the provisions of that ordinance. That proposal period ends next Friday, so we'll be having proposals from consultants. We're going to move as quickly as we can on getting them on board and getting the process going. We actually have already filed the notice of preparation so that we can get public comments on what issues should be addressed in the EIR. So hopefully,
Is there an ordinance that exists for them to
There
do
is
an
a-
EIR?
there is a draft ordinance based on the board's direction from February 16th. It's posted on our website. And
I didn't think they voted on anything. I thought that was just a meeting to
Well,
give direction.
it's the direction, and it is the draft based on what we understand the board's direction to be. So it is a draft ordinance. It could change. It's not been adopted. It's just that this is the ordinance that the board saw with the changes they gave direction on the 16th.
And did the board vote to move forward with the EIR?
It's not the board's decision.
Okay.
It's staff decision on what's the appropriate document, and we've worked with county council and looked at what has happened in other counties, and we feel that's the appropriate action to take.
And how much does that EIR cost?
We don't know yet. Our intent is to establish a fee that those benefiting from those regulations will reimburse the county for the cost of that EIR.
And in your previous comments, you said that to allow the people that we have given approvals to operate already. We've given approvals?
Tacit approval. We have not authorized anything, and in fact, technically, it is not authorized. We have what's called a permissive zoning, and if it's not listed in our zoning ordinance, it's not allowed. Code is silent on cultivation of marijuana. We treat marijuana differently than we do other agricultural crops. And so, we've had arguments that, well, it's just like any other agricultural crop. So if you can grow tomatoes, you should be able to grow marijuana. We don't treat it that way. We treat it differently. And so technically, under our code, it is not permitted. The board has chosen not to direct code enforcement or the sheriff to do an active enforcement on cultivation, other than clearly those that are associated with other illegal activities, and the sheriff's office is doing what they can to remove that aspect. But so we will continue to develop the ordinance based on the board's direction. In the meantime, when people come to our office and ask, where can I grow? We say, technically, you can. There is no ordinance that allows cultivation in this county right now.
You say you want to continue to work on the ordinance as directed by the board.
Yes.
The direction from the board on Tuesday was
Moratorium.
what?
They took no action. So we go back to the February 16th.
But there was direction.
Well,
There was this, there
direction in
was,
February. At the workshop in February, the board says, this is what we want to see in the ordinance.
Okay.
That's what we're working on.
did you not hear something different on Tuesday?
Well, they
No.
needed 4 votes, so no.
No action was taken on Tuesday.
No action was taken, but no action was taken on February 16th either.
No, there was action. There was direction given by the board. They had a series of motions. We want this, we don't want that.
Including like dispensaries will still be limited to CP, that
Well, I
kind of.
Yeah.
didn't think those were
But the-
actions. I thought they
Well,
were.
they didn't adopt an ordinance.
But
They told us to write an ordinance that has these provisions in it.
Okay.
And that's what we're working on right now. We have the draft ordinance. The next step in the process is to look at the environmental effects of that ordinance.
But wait a second, Peter. There was an action taken Tuesday. They voted no on the urgency
Right,
ordinance. Okay.
yeah.
And in voting no on it, they also made comments as to why they voted no on it. At least 3 of them did.
Yes.
And the consensus of the 3 was that they were, it sounded to me like they wanted to move in a different direction. Now, my concern is that if you're going ahead with an EIR that's based upon more or less the provisions of the urgency ordinance, that was voted down.
No, there was the draft urgency ordinance and then the proposed permanent ordinance. 2 separate things. They were very similar in some ways.
Yes.
But they were different in other ways. And the main difference was we were creating a registration process that said we're going to recognize these growers that were here previously and put a halt to anything else.
That was voted down.
That was voted down.
Right.
So we go back then to the status quo of the board's direction on the 16th to prepare a permanent ordinance. Now, I know there were 3 members that said, at this point in time, I'm willing to just put a ban on it, temporary ban. But that in and of itself required a 4/5 vote to pass.
Okay.
They
But,
didn't propose that. They didn't propose to amend to adopt an ordinance to do that.
okay, but didn't that action trigger a
Are we
new
getting into a
route?
discussion about something that we haven't agendized?
We're
Well,
talking,
I'm just wondering.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I mean, it's getting pretty,
Yeah.
I mean, we might be skirting it, I'm just saying.
I'm talking procedurals, not, not,
Yeah, I don't think we're actually, I mean, it's just a report of what happened on Tuesday
I'm
and
not
how
talking
it
about
affects
merits
us.
here, I'm just talking
Yeah.
about
No,
procedures.
but he's getting at intent, what was the intent of the board, and what were they thinking? And
Because they-
it doesn't match what their previous discussions. I don't know,
Be-
I'm feeling like we're,
Because I got from Peter what triggers the move toward an EIR. And that's.
The direction by the
it's
board on
same
February
discussion.
16th to
Okay.
prepare, and they did not take any other, and they did not pass another motion to change that direction.
Okay. Procedurally now, we are going to get an ordinance.
Yes,
We are going to pass something along to the board for consideration.
that's correct.
And that, what would be the time frame for this to happen at the earliest possible time frame?
Probably next fall, this fall. To prepare the EIR is going to take us at least,
No, I'm talking about an ordinance.
before you can consider the ordinance, we have to complete the environmental review.
Before we consider any ordinance or one particular kind of ordinance.
Any ordinance. So we have a project description, which is a draft ordinance based on the board's direction. The EIR consultant will look at the potential impacts of that. We will consider alternatives in that EIR and look at what, comparatively the impacts of an alternative might be. And then you as a body will then review that using the EIR as information to help assist you in determining what's your best recommendation to the board.
Okay. Procedurally, can this body initiate an action for consideration by the board?
such as.
I mean, you can make an advisory.
Everything we
vote.
do is advisory.
Right, but,
Such as, Vaughn, because no action was taken, our county is left wide open to a lot of damage right now. So I think what he's getting at is until we can have a ordinance complete that's proper, that's done with an EIR, that's defensible at that point, he's asking, is there a way for this body to send a recommendation forward to the supervisors to put in a moratorium so people slow down the process that's going on, because this is going to be a long process and we have no protections.
So that something is.
I think that if you were to agendize something to say we want to consider making an advisory vote to the board that they shouldn't do nothing, that they should adopt some urgency ordinance, i.e.
Do
moratorium.
we have to call it urgency again?
No,
Yes,
no. If it goes through this board, it's not voted on by the supervisors on an urgency basis.
the purpose of an urgency ordinance is it goes into effect immediately, and it's not, it
Go before the EIR.
can go before the EIR.
Okay.
So anything that happens before an EIR that is by definition on an urgency basis? This is a chicken and the egg thing here, it's in my mind.
Other counties were able to adopt a moratorium or stopping it until they could see what the state
So-
was
so
going
on-
to
yeah,
do, and they
the-
did it by 3 votes.
Yes, you could adopt an ordinance that severely limits or bans cultivation, and because there would be no environmental impact associated with that, you don't need to go through an EIR.
Right.
Our board has decided they want to allow and regulate it, so we need to look at what is the effect of allowing it, and how can we incorporate into the regulations mitigations.
Okay, and I understand that's the message that you got on the 16th of February. But I was there on Tuesday, and it seemed to me that there was a different message delivered to you.
Well, no, I don't think so.
And again,
They didn't vote. No one voted there was individual board member statements. But unless a motion is made and passed, there is no direction.
Okay, if we agendize an advisory ordinance and we pass something that's called an advisory ordinance, it goes to the board on what, under what condition?
It would just simply be I don't know. I don't, you know, the board sort of establishes the direction that they want to take. If you felt that that direction was in error and you wanted to just send an advisory vote that, you know, we disagree with you and we think that you ought to go this direction, I suppose it would just be a memorandum to the board.
Okay, if, on the other hand, the board agendizes the discussion and they get a consensus of a new direction, then it comes then it goes to you to write something that is compliant with this new direction. Then it comes to us for a vote. Then it goes up to them on what basis, urgency or otherwise. It's not an urgency issue anymore, correct?
Well, the permanent ordinance is not an urgency ordinance. And it will go through the normal process for adopting an ordinance. The reason that County Council and I proposed an urgency ordinance to the board is we felt we needed to do something.
I understand that.
And that, you know, need to be done now. We can't wait 2 or 3 months for it. We need to do something right now. The board could have modified that in many different ways. Yes, we need an urgency ordinance, but we don't like what staff has written. We want to put a moratorium on. That's something they could have done. They didn't.
But
The process.
I heard County Council asking the board for direction. I can't remember the exact conversation, but it seemed to me that that's what she was doing.
We were both trying to get direction from the board.
Can I ask you a question? Are there other commissioners that have questions about this issue? Because to me, again, I think we're sort of skirting a topic that is not agendized. And perhaps this is a conversation between Peter and Commissioner Tuno.
Well, I have a question.
Okay.
And maybe I'm confused, but aren't we talking about a couple different things here? One would be, is there something that this commission can do to recommend to the board that it impose a moratorium or a freeze, or call it what you want, similar to what was already put before the board, but that alone? In other words, not an accompanying permissive ordinance or anything like that, just a freeze. That's
Yes,
question
you
number
could
one.
do an advisory measure, advisory vote, says, board, we really think you need to do something right away, here's our reasons why, and we pass that on to the board. It'd be basically an informational document, but it would have the stamp of officialdom of the commission's action as a body.
Okay, and we would have to put that on an agenda
Yes.
in order to do that. Okay, I got that part. My second question is this. I think I've heard two different things, but maybe I just misheard. And that has to do with the necessity for an EIR for a permanent ordinance.
Yes.
And first I thought I heard that any permanent ordinance regarding marijuana cultivation would have to be preceded by an EIR.
Or some environmental
No.
review.
Any ordinance that's
Yeah.
adopted, regardless of what the topic is subject to CEQA.
Right.
Okay, now if you were to have an ordinance, if there were to be an ordinance that said either we're banning cultivation in this county completely, or we're banning everything but pick your limited number of plants for personal use, in other words, effectively banning commercial cultivation, would that require an EIR?
Probably not.
Okay, now, if that's the case, what, if anything, can this commission do in terms of recommending such an ordinance to the board? Can we just do that?
I think
Without an
you could
EIR?
agendize something that says, you know, we think that this is the direction the county should be going.
Okay, you called it an informational document.
Right.
Could it be a draft ordinance?
I think we get into, I mean, you know, you're an advisory body, and the board is the legislative body. And their direction takes precedent over what you would like to do. And so we would then be sort of in conflict with the direction from the board, unless they took a vote to say, you know, we think the commission's idea has merit, and we're going to change our mind.
Well, suppose the EIR comes in, and the majority of the commissioners said, we understand the board's direction, but we don't agree with it, and we are not going to recommend an ordinance along the lines of that direction. We want something, we think something more restrictive
That's your
is
prerogative.
justified. We can do that.
You can do that.
Why can't we do the same thing without an EIR if none is required? 'Cause I thought that the commission had the ability to initiate and recommend an ordinance really anytime it wanted to.
Well, you can. You can adopt a resolution to initiate an ordinance amendment. I think in this case where the board has already acted on an issue, they've filled the field. They've already said what their policy direction is going to be.
Okay, but that sounds like you're saying that that action trumps our power to take the actions that Kelly is just talked about.
I think if this were a new issue and the board hadn't already addressed it, you have the authority to initiate an ordinance amendment. We want to create something new regarding kite flying. You know, you could do that. But where the board has already stated its policy direction, I think you'd be frankly wasting your time. You could do it. There's nothing that prevents the commission from doing that. And if you think that you could sway the board into changing its policy direction, it may be worthwhile.
Well, just suppose that a majority of the commission, speaking hypothetically, did not agree with the board's direction. And I don't understand the case to be that a majority of the commission then has to approve something that they don't agree with.
Because the board has already given us their direction. I mean,
Why go through us?
why have us?
Well, there could be nuances to the ordinance that you say, okay, you know, we understand the board wants to allow commercial cultivation in the county, but maybe this zone is not appropriate. I think that, I'll be frank, I think that if you just say, we think it should be banned, you'll be wasting your time. If you say, okay, we don't agree, and you could make a statement at the very beginning, we think it should be banned. However, if the board's going to go down this path, here's the changes we would recommend to make it less impactive on the community. I think that would be the purpose, that would be the best use of your time.
I just don't know that we are limited to nuances.
You're not, and I think you need to, I mean, this is a very tricky situation. And I've actually never really been in this before where I see that the commission appears to be opposed to the direction, the majority of the commission opposed to the direction that the board is going. So the question is, what's the best use of your time on this?
So,
Do you want to try to convince the board to change their mind, or do you want to try to make the best thing out of a sow's ear?
Seems to me
I don't know.
It seems to me the simplest way to handle this would be for the board who voted on the February 12th date, or 14th, I don't remember what date, 16th, to ask for a reconsideration.
And that may be sort of the best step to take for you if you're really concerned about this, is that put something on your agenda to ask the board to reconsider. And they could say,
To reconsider what?
To reconsider
reconsider
their
the direction that
February
was given
16th
to
decision.
staff.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, I mean, trying to get something done maybe quicker. If we're asking them to reconsider, it's for a reason. Why don't we just look at giving them a package that complies with what we believe should be the case for them to consider?
How would you comply with the
Richard,
ground?
there's,
I mean, we'd have to put something on the agenda. I would, frankly, if there's a conflict between what the board tells me to do and what you want me to do, I'm going to do what the board's going to do.
That's right.
And so I don't want to spend my time preparing an ordinance when the board has said, this is not what we want. I'd rather be working on the general plan. You know, if that's what you want me to do, I will do it.
Okay. If the board were to agendize this reconsideration, how much notice, what's the noticing procedure for that to happen? How soon could they do that?
72 hours?
Okay.
They couldn't take any action on an ordinance, but they could reconsider the direction.
That's
that they're
right,
giving
that's
us.
all.
Yeah.
Now, that would trigger what from you?
Nothing, other than listening and taking notes.
Okay, but then if they voted to reconsider, and they did it along the lines of what I believe the consensus was on Tuesday, hypothetically, that would open the door for us to consider an ordinance along those lines for their consideration, correct?
It would provide direction for me and council to develop a draft ordinance consistent with their direction that then would be sent to you for review.
Okay. Time-wise, that's not, if that were to happen, if that series played out, they make the recommendation, you write the ordinance, we approve it or tweak it or whatever and pass it on to them, and it gets passed by them, the EIR gets put on hold until this is determined, until that moves through the process, because it has the potential to eliminate the EIR. Am I right?
There's a lot of future tripping
There are a lot of
speculation
ifs,
going on here,
but
you know,
yeah.
so what do you guys want to do? Can we like wrap this up? What direction would you like this commission to go? I mean, do you want just to draft a letter to the Board of Supervisors? Is that what your
Well,
pleasure is?
I'm thinking two different things. One is, wouldn't it be a good idea to agendize an item to ask the board to reconsider the freeze, just the freeze, the moratorium? That would be one thing. The second thing would be to agendize an item that would ask the board to reconsider the direction that they gave on February 16th. That would be the two things.
Aren't they related?
They are, but they are not necessarily, they don't necessarily go together.
They're two
Okay.
separate actions.
All right.
Two separate actions, and one could be done independently of the other. And I think maybe legislative bodies get in trouble when they try to do too much at one time.
So is there some consensus here?
For the meeting,
I'm having a problem with, it sounds to me what Peter is saying, that he will not draft any kind of an ordinance for the board that is not in keeping with their direction.
All right, he's
That's
not
right.
going to do that.
He's not gonna do that.
He's not going to do that.
Yeah, so long as we can't really do anything like that.
No, he's,
I think what Commissioner Wooster is suggesting is that you put on your agenda I'm not sure it's necessarily a resolution, but a statement requesting the board to reconsider two items. One is to, essentially adopt an urgency ordinance to put a freeze on cultivation. And the second one would be to reconsider the direction given on the permanent ordinance from February 16th.
okay. We could agendize that. In the meantime, the board can agendize it on their own.
They could.
To give you direction, eliminating that agenda item from our list.
Certainly.
Okay, so then there's no downside to agendizing it for our 28th meeting.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay,
all right, so is that, I mean, we're taking action on something that's not.
No, all you're doing
agendized.
is saying you want to
No,
have
all
this
we're
come
doing-
back on
Okay.
future.
No different than when I asked for PD to have a study session.
Okay, so is there consensus that who was, I guess, in favor of having this item agendized for
I
428?
am.
I am.
I am as to
And
both.
Okay, and I'm not, so it's agendized. It will be. All right, moving on. I guess that's it.
That's all I have.
I would say that, as far as the 5th and the 12th go, and my not being here, not that safety isn't important, but if, just to keep the wheels in motion, if that element comes up to bat, for one of those meetings, then I'd say, I wish you guys would forge ahead without me.
Do what?
Go ahead without me.
Is it possible for her to submit notes to you, Peter, that could be referenced at any point in time during that hearing?
Sure you can.
Sure, yeah.
Because, Vaughn, I'd
Okay.
like to.
We all
have
do
your
that.
notes
Okay.
Yeah, if you have
get
anything you want
Peter.
to
All right.
specifically
All right,
address.
just so that we keep the momentum going, and especially knowing that we're going to have a break in June with Peter gone.
Well, the cat's away.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Okay, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.